Let's spend some time here with Joe Sestak talking about that incident in the Persian Gulf the other day. Congressman, Admiral, and senatorial candidate. Good to talk to you again. How you been?
Great, Joe. And please, it's also Joe here.
Okay, Joe. Well, as far as this incident happened yesterday, we're hearing all kinds of reaction to it. But with your broad background in the military, also in politics, let's get at first your military assessment of what happened there, because you did, command a carrier battle group in the Persian Gulf, so you're familiar with the waters there in that part of the world.
Yes, pretty contested waters there. Hundreds of small craft like these going back and forth. Middle of the night, you can't even tell whether they're just small boats that are sneaking cigarette smuggling into Iran. It's a pretty tough area to find out who's who. Been on those small riverine craft. I went with my sailors out, even as a Navy admiral, to board ships to make sure there wasn't illegal contraband going into Iraq when we had sanctions on them. And I also commanded a carrier battle group during a period of time where I saw Iranian vessels come out after two of my small riverine craft that were boarding some, and had two of my helicopters fly over there. Also had an incident where they came towards our vessel, the aircraft carrier, in the middle of the night. We thought someone veered out towards us, took my helicopters over, flashlights, rotor blades, ready to take them down with guns. Pretty tough area, but in this case, we were using this as a utility boat, logistics, and broke down and drifted into territorial waters around Farsi Island that are owned by them. And I would argue that we were making sure here that from a distance they were safe as much as we could, but luckily we had a communications channel open that we didn't have when the British in 2007 had about 15 of their sailors taken by the Iranians, and only 13 days later did they release them. I would argue that having that communications line over because the Iranian Accord helped resolve this situation much more readily.
So the Iranians, were they coming over to lend assistance to what was a broken down vessel? And at that time, did they realize it was American, or did they come across that possibly as they got closer to it? And was it unusual that they wouldn't just offer them parts or help them get back to the fleet or whatever, as well, other than take them kind of prisoner and bring them to shore?
A little bit of speculation here, obviously. We do know this, as it appears. They did not come out into international waters to do this. We went into and drifted a mile or two into their territory, their owned waters, much like we would board a North Korean vessel that was military. If it drifted within 12 miles of America, we would go aboard and making sure they weren't going to do damage. But it is also the law of the sea that if you see a vessel in distress, you must stop to help it. And so how they went about it is probably not dissimilar to how we would have, within our territorial waters, have a vessel that's broken down, drifting, gone on board, seen what we could do to do it. Now, how they went about it, I would say that if it was a military crew from North Korea or someone there, we probably would have had them put their hands up in the air to safeguard ourselves. Let me tell you, when I went on these merchant ships, we made sure those merchant men and women were off in a corner, lined up. We didn't point guns at them to make sure that I didn't have my sailors all of a sudden ambushed from something. But and they probably took, without a question, propaganda advantage of this. But on the other hand, we drifted into their waters here.
So is that why we did not go to give assistance to our vessels then?
Yeah, I think here is that I don't even can tell you if this is an Iranian Revolutionary Guard base. I will tell you this: the Iranian Navy and the Iranian Coast Guard is extraordinarily professional, Joe. They will call you up on the radio, say, passing 500 yards in your starboard side. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard's kind of a little strange out there. You don't trust them you don't turn your back on them. But they're not as proficient and good. I wouldn't be surprised at this. They didn't know who they were. They knew there was something on their radar within their territorial waters, a couple miles away from their island that they own there. And only when they got upon it found out it was U.S. Navy. And we're kind of adversarial with this nation. And so my take on it is that I'm not sure this would have come out as it did, as it should have, without this line of communications we had. So I'm not surprised this has went these various steps.
Okay, now the political side of this, as far as how we're handling it, and you mentioned, of course, we've got the arrangement with Iran that more or less had the pipeline open so we could discuss with them. And John Kerry and his counterpart over there apparently have a good relationship. So what you described in terms there I've never really heard before. The amount of traffic and the tensions in that water in those waters there. It's a good thing we had this, and they used it and kind of backed it down from what in another era might have been an escalatory situation.
Joe, you hit it on the head. When I was operating at sea during the Cold War with the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, we were in bigger oceans there, Mediterranean Sea, North Atlantic, Western Pacific. We had an established, the military asked for it, that we could have what's called an Incident at Sea Agreement, INCSE we called them, with those two nations, so that they're at sea, because everybody owns the sea unless you're inside someone's territorial waters. We actually established agreements between our militaries that you could, when something like this was happening, you could pick up a hotline and call them. When I was Admiral in the Carrier Battle Group in the Persian Gulf, after I had some vessels come towards me and veer away, till this day, I don't know if they were cigarette smuggling boats or a Raiding Revolutionary Guard because the radars weren't on, but I had my helicopters down, shining on them and all. Well, I'll tell you, I put out a message saying, you may not like to hear this, but I'd like to see us have an Incident at Sea agreement with Iran. Joe, I can remember going through the Straits of Hormuz. No military vessel of the United States had ever been overflowing in international waters, which is permitted, but by a military aircraft by Iran. And we're briefed about what to do, and we leave it to a 35-year-old Navy captain at the time, me, to decide, do I shoot it down or not? I'm going through that Straits of Hormuz, and you can't maneuver there. It's like 2 miles wide. And you're going through, and all of a sudden, military aircraft took off from Iran. We're tracking it. No, it's military because we can read the codes on the radar. Keeps coming towards my vessel. I mean, we're at a general alert, of course, because you always go into that place like that. Keeps coming, getting lower, but I don't see the military fire control radar let off. Let it fly over me. Right decision, tough time. Permitted, absolutely. Russians did it to us a lot. But you know what? Tough waters. And so, therefore, to have communications like we don't have between Democrats and Republicans is something that's absolutely critical, where something small can all of a sudden blow up on us.
Joe, you're leading me into my next question. Some of the political fallout has been rather excited. What's your assessment of that?
I was sitting here when I saw the Google alert of what happened. And I got called by a TV cable show to come on real quickly. Matter of fact, I was supposed to be on Fox today on this. I'll go on tomorrow. But I went on right away, and I said, I just hope cool, wise heads prevail. I got to tell you, Joe, both parties have such a dearth, just an absence of any type of depth of military experience. People think militaries can fix a problem. We can stop a problem. We can't fix problems, and so if you're going to use us, all of a sudden act tough, let me not use that term, armchair strategist from Washington, D.C., just quiet down. Let it work out. I remember Admiral Crow, head of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, always said, first word from the battlefront will be wrong. Wait for things to clear up. And so now that they're making political hay of all this, remember, what that young sailor there that we all saw in the video, I joined up there in Vietnam. And when I joined up, it was you only say your name, your Social Security number, I think your birth date or whatever. But torture was happening with John McCain and others. And in those prisons, they changed it. That Hoy Neilton said, no, you give them what's necessary when you feel it's necessary. And you know what? Sit back, and unless you have served as a minimum, or don't even begin to critique what's happening out there. Let things try to work out. This isn't about testosterone. This is about being mature and trying to work things out so we don't have an undue conflict out there.
Joe, thank you so much for the insight. Good talking to you again, too.
Joe, thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. On the KQV Live line, former Admiral in the Navy, of course, Congressman, and again, a senatorial candidate, Joe Sestak.